Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talk Back. It's Monday, March 29th, 2021. It is almost 92 years after this wonderful guest I have was born in Germany. And what a story she has to tell. You know, we've been so immersed this year in tragedies, the pandemic, the racial issues, our election woes. It is so nice to have a good story. And Betty Grebenshikoff, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, is here with us to help tell this wonderful story of reunion and hope and friendship after so many years. So hi, Betty. It's wonderful to see you.
Hello, Sheila. Glad to be here.
Oh, it's so nice to meet you. And I have to say, I've been reading so many articles about you. You are a celebrity. When I spoke to you on the phone in arranging this, you said, well, Sheila, I have to get off. I'm due for my next interview. What does it feel like to be a celebrity?
I don't know. It's just a wonderful thing. The whole reunion is wonderful, and the fact that I can now talk about all this on the air and in the media everywhere makes me very happy.
Oh, that's terrific. But before we get started, I want to straighten out all the names. So I read you were born Ilsa Cohn, and now we're talking to you as Betty Grebenshikoff. And then you wrote a book about your experiences called My Name Was Sarah. So please straighten out for us all these names and where they come from.
I get confused too sometimes. I was born Elsa Kohn in Germany, okay? I had several middle names, but in 1938, as most of you know, the German government made all Jewish females use the name Sarah as a middle name, and all Jewish males had to use the name Israel as a middle name. That was not a compliment. That was an insult and a degradation. And it only served to show any authorities, anyone who wanted to see our papers, that we were Jewish and therefore we were not good enough. So when many years later I wrote my memoir, I named it once. My name was Sarah. It isn't anymore. But I had other middle names that got lost in the meantime. And one of them is Betty. And I decided I would just use Betty from now on because Sarah is in the past.
Okay, so that's a wonderful explanation of what happened to the Jews as their papers were inscribed with Israel and Sarah to denote that they were Jewish, and those were some of the names on the passports that were used to leave. So tell us, Betty, what was life like in the beginning when you were a little girl in Germany before the onslaught of the Nazis?
I had a wonderful childhood. There was nothing wrong. I had a sister who was 2 years older than me. My parents and I and my sister lived in a nice apartment. My mother's parents lived nearby, uncles and aunts. My father's parents lived in what was then Czechoslovakia. And we had a very nice childhood. I mean, we had everything we wanted. We went to Jewish schools, of course, and we played in the parks, and we did whatever children do. And at the same time, of course, I had my girlfriend in school from the age of 6 till 9, and her name was Anna Marie Barenberg.
Okay, so what year were you born in, Betty?
Excuse me?
What year were you born?
I was born in 1929. I am now 91 years old. And I consider it just a number. I just keep.
Wonderful. What did your father do for a profession in Germany?
My father worked for a stationery firm. He traveled all over Germany and all over Europe for them. And he was very fortunate that he had a very nice boss who was not Jewish, but who protected him when Jewish people lost their jobs in Germany. And people were not allowed to work or be doctors or lawyers, or they were pushed out of all the professions. And my father's boss protected him, so he always had a job.
Well, and that started happening after 1933, right? When you were about 4 or 5 years old, when the Nuremberg laws came in and professions and all other things were closed, started to be closed to the Jews, right?
Yes, yes. But of course, I didn't know anything about it at the time because I was very young. And
Right.
also, my parents protected my sister and me as much as they could. So we didn't really understand what was going on for a long time.
So, as a little girl, as an innocent kid before all this kind of hit you, uh, what did you and your friend Anna Maria, what did you dream about? What did you play? What were your thoughts about what I'm going to do when I grow up? I mean, tell us about your childhood dreams and hopes.
Well, we had a wonderful time together. Of course, at first we used to go out and play outside and everything. But after 1938, after Crystal Night, we our parents didn't want us to be outside anymore because it was too dangerous, especially since we had already been pushed around and had the stones thrown at us and all by the other children who were not Jewish. So Anna Maria and I played in each other's homes. We ate too much candy, and we played dress up, and we played movie stars, and we both wanted to be movie stars at one point. And another time we were trying to be nurses. So we played at home, and we had a very nice time. But it was dangerous to be outside, so it was mainly indoors that we played with each other.
And when did you realize, as a Jewish little girl, when did you realize that something wasn't right, that something was wrong about the government, and there was something dangerous about being Jewish? When did that kind of get to you at your young age?
Well, the night of broken glass, also known as Crystal Night, was really the warning bell that told all the Jews in Europe, particularly in Germany and Austria, that things were getting to be very bad for Jewish people. And my parents couldn't hide it from us any longer because on Crystal Night, for instance, when they were out there rampaging on the streets and burning synagogues and taking people prisoner and throwing our books out of the synagogue, our prayer books, and burning them out there, and smashing our shops and all that. We were home that night, and we sat on the floor in the dark in our apartment, and my parents said, "You must be very quiet, don't make a sound, so that the neighbors won't know that we're home," because there were neighbors there who had children who were in the Hitler Youth, and those children could denounce us. Anybody could say, "There's Jews in here, you can come in and get them, kill them, hurt them, or something." So we learned pretty quickly that there was an end for us in Germany.
Right. What did you personally see or experience yourself? You mentioned that people were yelling at you at one point. What personal experiences did you have seeing, hearing, feeling what was happening around Kristallnacht, November 1938?
Well, we stayed home for a couple of days because there was still a lot going on. Excuse me, on the streets. Before that, even I had already realized that things were bad because the other children would throw stones at me on the street when I came home from school, or they pushed me in the gutter and they would spit on me. And I actually asked my mother, "What did I do to them? Why can't I play with them?" And she said, "We have to be very careful because we're Jews." So after Crystal Night, a couple of days later, we went out on the street, my mother, my sister, and I, to see my grandparents to see if they were okay. And I still remember the glass being on the street and walking on that, crunching on that glass is something that you never forget, even today, so many years later, decades later. If I walk on broken glass somewhere on a parking lot or a street, just for a second, I get that little bell ringing in my head. That's Crystal Night. You can't get away from the fear. You can't get away from that.
As we read in history and learning from people like you, that was the day when Jews in Europe realized that their lives as Jews were no longer safe. Over 30,000 people were arrested, many men, people like your dad, sent to jail, but your father was not sent to jail. And your family, unlike others, really took to heart the dangers and made some plans. Tell us about that and why you think your family was able to grasp that danger and take the route to try and leave.
Well, you know, German Jews had always been in the arts and the sciences, and they were doing quite well in Berlin in particular. And they always said it can't get much worse than it is now. There was always anti-Semitism in this country, and it can't get too much worse. Unfortunately, Kristallnacht showed us that that was the beginning of the end. And it was not the end of the beginning, but it was the beginning of the end. And it was just, it made my father realize that we had to get out, because he had a summons from the Gestapo that he should come and have an interview with them on May the 21st, 1939. And he realized then that if he went to that interview, he would not come back, and we would be in trouble. So he moved heaven and earth to get us out, but it was very difficult because we had no papers. Even though my father fought in the First World War for the Germans, as did my two grandfathers and all my uncles, they, and at the beginning of the Second World War, that didn't help them at all. On the contrary. So he decided we had to get out somehow, and we tried different places to go to, but we didn't have people helping us in America or England. We didn't know where to go. And that's when people said that there might be one place where you can go to. And that place is Shanghai, China.
So interesting, Betty, that we're just reliving those experiences through you and other books and other stories about the most unlikely place of refuge during World War II, fighting the Nazis, was Shanghai, when so many other places, America and so many other places, were really closed to immigration. And the Jews in Germany were able to get passports, visas to Shanghai. So tell us about when your dad found out that he could get those visas and you were going to leave. How did you feel? You were certainly old enough to experience a feeling about that.
Well, first of all, we did not need a visa or a passport to go to Shanghai. Shanghai was an open port at that point, and anybody who could get themselves over there could just walk in. So that was the loophole at that point, which helped about 20,000 Jewish refugees, which we were at that time, to leave Germany by some fashion or other and get into Shanghai once they could get themselves out of Germany. So 2 days before my father's date with the Gestapo, we left Berlin, but only because my father went to the shipping company. He didn't have to get, like I said, he didn't need a visa or anything. We went to a shipping company, a Japanese shipping company, and asked for tickets, and they laughed at him. They said, oh, well, there's so many people trying to get out that we don't have tickets for another 6 months. And that was too late for us. So my father bribed the shipping agent, went back there with a lot of money, handed him the papers and said, please look at my papers again. And the guy took the money, and shortly after that, we had tickets. And that's what you had to do. You had to bribe or lie or steal or do whatever you could just to get out of Germany. Once you were out, then you could go wherever you maybe had a visa or no visa. Like in Shanghai, you didn't need a visa.
Wow, that's a fantastic story about your father's adventure, his courage, his bravery to do that for you at that time. So tell me again, you're 9 years old, something like that. How are you feeling? And are you ready to say goodbye to your friends and your life in Germany? How are you feeling about that?
Well, my parents made us think that we were going on an adventure, But at the same time, you're getting a lot of mixed messages. Like my mother was crying a lot, and we had to say goodbye to our grandparents, which was very, very hard for us. I was 9 years old. Since the age of 9, I never had grandparents again on either side. So we did the best we could. We packed everything we thought we would need in the Orient. We thought they didn't have anything there, so we packed whatever we could into a packing crate called what we called the lift, and sent that out. But of course, we never got it in Shanghai. It got lost on the way. However, my girlfriend and we realized that we were leaving, but they were still trying to get out, her family. And we had to say goodbye to one another. And that was very, very hard.
Yeah, yeah. At some point, did you write a note to her or she to you?
Well, she had this little book, which all of us really had in those days, like a little autograph book, And we wrote little things to each other on that. And I don't have mine anymore, but she kept hers with a picture of me in it. And I said, "Oh my God, who's that fat little kid?" It was just my face, when I was maybe 8 or something. And I wrote this little verse in German there, which I believe you have. And it was just something that we did. And she kept that, and she showed it recently, when we suddenly became so-called celebrities.
Right. Well, we'll get to see those images in just a little bit. And let's just go forward with the story. And then we have some wonderful images that we can show that you can explain. So you went on a ship. Was that the first time you were on a big ocean liner like that?
Well, it was really a small ocean liner. It was only about 9,000 tons, but we thought it was huge because we had been on the rivers before, and we had been to Czechoslovakia to visit our grandparents and all that. But we had never been on such a luxurious ship because we traveled first class with all that money my father bribed the guy with. We had very good cabins. One uncle and one aunt came with us, and the rest of them all stayed in Germany and in Czechoslovakia and in Austria, and practically all of them never got out. They got murdered in the Holocaust.
Do you remember where you sailed from, Betty? Where did you sail from? Where did you travel to take the ship?
We left Berlin on a train to go to Italy, to Naples, and we picked up the ship in Naples, and there were streamers going down on the side, and the band was playing, and it was like a pleasure cruise. And my sister and I thought, gee, this is terrific. We're going to have a good time here. And not realizing what actually we were doing, And we were on the ocean for 4 weeks.
Wow.
And then finally we landed in Shanghai, which was a totally different life from what we had ever seen before.
Any experiences on the ship that you want to tell us about that you found over that 4 weeks? Did you get bored? Were you exasperated? Were you excited? How did you feel?
Oh, there were other children on the ship. There were many refugees. We were refugees, but we didn't feel like that at the time. But we played with the other children, and they had tea parties. They had tea parties for us, and little games for us. They were very nice to us. The crew was Japanese. They were very nice, and we had special food for the kids, and we had a good time on the ship. But again, we got a lot of mixed messages, with my mother and the other women being very sad and crying because they understood what was going on much better than we did. And the men being very nervous and always walking around with their briefcases because they kept all their papers with them constantly. And here were these men with their suits and their hats and everything and their briefcases on a ship going through the tropics. It was funny. It was different,
Yeah. Do you remember what things did you bring with you? What were you able to take with you? What did you want? What were you sad about leaving behind?
Well, first of all the stuff all the things that we put in the big lift, we thought we would need, in Shanghai. That we didn't have with us, and we never saw again. We did have some luggage with us, and the main thing was that my father made sure we took our school books with us so he could teach us a few English words every day, which we were not really interested in because we wanted to play. And um, and my mother brought a doll on deck with us, which I didn't know she had brought, and that was my favorite doll. I called her Mady, and it was a real joy when she opened up the suitcase and took her out and gave it to me. I remember that. I'd love to play with dolls.
Was your sister younger or older than you? How old was she compared to you?
My sister was 11. I was 9. So she
Okay.
found other girls, other children that were more in her age group, and she played with them. And I played with the others, and we had a very nice journey. It was actually and not as traumatic, but looking back, I can see how awful it must have been for my parents.
Sure, sure. Well, it was amazing that they tried to make it just a quote adventure for you and tried to ease your fears at that point. So they
Yes,
deserve a lot of credit for doing that for you,
yes,
right?
yes,
Yes,
yes.
absolutely. So tell me, Betty, when you landed in when the ship docked in Shanghai, what did you see? What did you feel? What did you experience that very moment that you left that ship and entered this new world of China, Shanghai?
It was culture shock because the ships landed in a very, very poor section of town where all the ships landed. And it was total culture shock. It was dirty, it was loud, it was crowded, it was not exactly what we were used to at all, because we were used to a sanitized, orderly experience in Germany, and then again on that Japanese ship, and suddenly we're landing in this chaos over there. But we were fortunate because American and Jewish organizations had stepped in to help the almost 20,000 Jewish refugees that landed there within a short time. And some of us with very little money, like our family, we had very little money left because my father had bribed the shipping people and also left money with the grandparents so that they would be okay. But we had to get used to a lot of different ideas, and particularly cleanliness and noise and all that. But I must point out, and this is very important to me and has been all my life, that if it hadn't been for Shanghai, I wouldn't be here today. And if there hadn't been for the kindness and the friendliness of the Chinese people that we landed amongst, it would have been quite a different story. And they just accepted us. They didn't know the meaning of the word anti-Semitism. They didn't say, "What are you dirty Jews doing here?" like we had been used to in Germany, because they called us all kinds of names over there, of course, aside from persecuting us. And they never did that. They always said, "No, okay, you'll be fine." And it was benign neglect, and we didn't never felt uncomfortable with the Chinese people. We played with
Right,
the Chinese children, but we didn't speak each other's language. It didn't matter.
right. So where did you and your family live when you got there? What kind of quarters did you have?
Well, a friend of my father's who had gotten there before us had found a room for us, for the four of us, and another small room for my uncle and aunt nearby. And we lived very simply, and we went to the Heime, they called them. It's like the settlement camps, and got our food there in the beginning, up until we got a little bit bigger accommodations where my mother and my aunt could cook, and then we ate at home. But we would go to these places and pick up our food there, and it was pretty good.
Well, we know through history that before the German and Austrian Jews came to Shanghai to escape Hitler, we know that other Jews had had come to Shanghai century before, the Baghdadi Jews, and those Jews had become wealthy merchants and were very helpful to your people that came with you, to the Jewish refugees, in helping them with food and shelter and other schools. Did you go to school in Shanghai?
Well,
what was your education like?
that was another story. The school that was Sir Horace Kaduri, who belonged to the Kaduri family, Iraqi Jews who had become very wealthy and had been there for many years. He built a school for the refugee children called the Shanghai Jewish Youth Association School, but everybody called it the Kaduri School. And he built that school for us. And here we were, all these little German-speaking kids, and the teachers were all English. And we didn't understand each other. So here's this teacher standing in the front of 50 kids or 60 kids in one room, singing English songs like "My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean" and "You Take the High Road and I'll take the low road. I'll be in Scotland for ye." I had no idea what we were singing. It took me years to figure out what a for ye meant. But and we had to learn in a hurry, and we did. We had no choice. So that's how we learned English, and that's where we went to school in the first few years.
And what kind of occupation did your dad wind up with in the years that you were in Shanghai?
He was working in different Chinese companies. He had some English, and he was working as a bookkeeper for English firms, and he made just enough money to keep us out of the out of the camps, out of the settlement camps, so that we could rent a room for us.
Right. So, did you have a Jewish life there? I've read about a synagogue being there, Jewish youth groups. What was your Jewish experience there in Shanghai those years?
Well, we kept up, of course, our Jewish ceremonies and all, and particularly over the high holidays like Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. The Jewish community, even during the war when we were interned by the Japanese, they rented theaters, and everybody went there for services that were conducted by German Jewish rabbis and cantors, and it felt just a little bit like being home. Not quite, but a little bit.
Right.
And we kept it up, you know.
Right. And at some point, you arrived there in 1939, is that right? 1939, yes. You got there. And by 1941, in Pearl Harbor, and then the Japanese allying with Hitler and the Nazis, things changed in Shanghai. Talk about what happened during the war after Pearl Harbor.
Well, after Pearl Harbor, if you were an American or a British or a Dutch citizen, the Japanese military would lock up all your assets, your homes, whatever you had, your businesses, and put you in detention camps. And they were very bad. There were not enough facilities there at all. And but they didn't know what to do with the almost 20,000 Jewish refugees that were scattered all over Shanghai by that time. So the Germans decided to, they sent over Colonel Meisinger over to the Japanese military in Shanghai and told them to get rid of the Jews, kill them. And you don't need them. He says, we use Cyclone B gas here in Germany, and it works, and you can kill your Jews in no time at all. But the Japanese didn't want to go that far. So instead of that, they put us in a what they called a segregated area down by the river, where we had already landed anyway in that area. And it was, in reality, it was a ghetto, but it was a Japanese-style ghetto. They didn't actually kill us in there, but they were nasty. They were very, very obnoxious, and they made us stay all in one small area. Everybody that came in after 1937 had to move over there. except for the ones who had come earlier, or the Russian Jews who had already been there, and the Iraqi Jews. And the Iraqis, of course, were British by that time, and they were in detention camps.
Right. So
So
I've read, Betty, that the almost 18 to 20,000 Jews that came over from Germany and Austria to escape Hitler had to go into that, what you call the Shanghai ghetto,
we call
but
it
you were
Shanghai.
joining about maybe 100,000 of Chinese who also live in that almost one square area. I think it's called the Hangkou district of Shanghai, right? What was that like? Did you and your family have to move to a different place, or were you already living in what was to be known as the ghetto?
We were living just outside the so-called ghetto, so we all had to move into that one area. And every room, one of our landlord, who had a house outside the area, exchanged it for a house within the ghetto area. And so everybody had one room total. That's it for the whole family, for all your things, for whatever cooking situation you could dream up. And 16 people an hour on our floor alone, on the second floor, used one bathroom. It was tough. It was very hard.
Now, miraculously, through all of this, you grew up to be a teenage girl, and eventually you met your husband and married in Shanghai. Could you tell us about that? How did that relationship develop?
Well, that was after the war, of course. I mean, we lived like that for up until 1945, until the war ended. And then the Americans came in and took over the city and liberated us. And of course, that there was a lot of joy in those days and celebrating, except for the fact that we found out what had happened to our relatives in Germany. At least we found out partially. Never found out about all of them. But we all went to work for the Americans as much as we could, because there were good jobs to be had at that time. They had taken over all the big buildings and everything, and they had also taken over a swimming pool on the race course, which all Shanghai Hands will remember very well, that swimming pool there. And one day, since I was working at that point for the American Navy as a secretary, I had permission to go to that swimming pool, and I found there a young lifeguard who offered to teach me how to dive. Well, I wasn't a very good swimmer, but he was very handsome, and so I said, "Of course, I'll do it." And so I dived all afternoon, and I didn't drown, obviously. And we went out for dinner that night, and I called my mother, and I said, "I met this crazy Russian over here," and he asked me to go out for dinner, and she said, "You be very careful." And I'll wait up
old
for
were
you.
you then? How old were you then, Betty?
I was
When you
18.
first? Oh, okay.
18. So 2 weeks later, we got engaged, and 2 months later, we got married.
Wow. And you
He was
stayed in
not
Shanghai?
Jewish. Yeah, he
Wow.
was not Jewish. He was Russian Orthodox and had lived in Shanghai most of his life. They were white Russians, his family.
Interesting. So, we should not have skipped over the end of the war, where because the Americans did come in and liberate Shanghai. But between 1945 and 50, most of the Jews, of the 20,000 or so that had come to Shanghai as a refuge from Hitler, eventually left because of what was happening in China. Talk about what happened after you married and how the political situation made your life different.
Well, we were married in 1948. By 1949, the government changed. The communist army marched in, and we saw that through the windows. And things changed for foreigners because they wanted China for the Chinese, and foreigners were strongly encouraged to leave. So we had to find a place to go. So 11 years after living in China, we had to find, my family and my husband and I had to find another place to go to. Still don't have any papers. My sister by that time had gone to America in 48 as a war bride. She married an American soldier and went over as a war bride. And my husband and I tried to go to different places, but it was very, very hard. Plus, I was almost ready to give birth to my first daughter, Jennifer. And so eventually we found a lady in Australia who would guarantee for us. So while I was 8.5 months pregnant, we left Shanghai, my husband and I. My parents still had no place to go at that point. And we went off to Sydney, Australia. On the way again, being saved by and really helped by Sir Horace Kadoorie, whose family, of course, owns the Peninsula Hotels. And we got stranded in Hong Kong and they wouldn't allow me to go on a ship to go to Australia at that point because of my pregnancy. And he arranged for us to get to Australia by air. So he had quite a large part, a good part in my life.
Wow. So your daughter Jennifer was born in Australia, in Sydney?
And she was born in Sydney a few weeks after we got there. And then a year and a half later, I got another daughter there, Elizabeth. And then after 3 years, in 1953, we managed to get papers to get to America. My parents by that time had come here and had made a life in New Jersey. And so we left on another difficult journey. Up till that point, the journeys were not pleasant, very unpleasant. But still, we made it and we got to America in 1953.
Wow. And so from there, you and your husband had more children, is that right?
We had 3 more. We had Nina and Irene and Peter. And we lived a pretty good life over here. We were happy and we worked hard. My husband worked as a teacher. He was always a teacher and a lifeguard and a gym teacher. And I worked as a secretary, first part-time and then full-time. And we were just delighted to be here where we had always wanted to be. Everybody always wants to come to America, and that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed at all. And we're just very fortunate and very blessed that we have made a life over here.
Right. When did you lose your husband, Betty?
10 years ago.
And how many
That-
many grandchildren and great grandchildren do you have now?
Well, I have 7 grandchildren and 6 great grandchildren.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And you've retired to St. Petersburg, Florida?
Yes, after living in New Jersey for many years, I retired to St. Petersburg, and Elizabeth, my second daughter, lives here, and Jennifer, the first Australian child, lives in Tampa. So we're in the same area. Peter, my son, still lives in New Jersey, and Irene lives in Seattle. Unfortunately, sadly, we lost our middle daughter, Nina.
Sorry.
She died some years back.
Oh, sorry. Just sorry to hear that. Oh, I wanted to mention that I read that your wedding gown when you married your husband in Shanghai is in the Shanghai Jewish Refugees Museum, right?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
delighted about that because the dress was made for me actually by my what was then my future mother-in-law, my husband's mother, who had a very fancy dress shop in Shanghai, and she had this dress made especially for me, and I wore it in Shanghai, and then my 2 daughters, Irene and Nina, both wore it when they got married here in America,
Right.
and then I went back for the 4th time to Shanghai with one of my daughters, Irene, the one who wore the dress also. And we donated it to the Shanghai Jewish Refugee Museum, who have been absolutely wonderful all along also, and who have documented this whole story of the Shanghai Jews. And they have my dress there as an artifact, and I'm delighted about it.
That is just wonderful. That's just terrific. So, along the way during your wonderful life here in America, you started speaking out at some point about your experiences in Shanghai and what a wonderful refuge that was to save you and your family. And all of your speeches, some of them were recorded by the various Holocaust museums, the Shoah Foundation. And at the same time, during your speeches, sometimes you would mention this little friend that you had growing up in Germany who you missed terribly and who you maybe thought, God forbid, had perished in the Holocaust with her family. Talk about those feelings and how you would mention her in your speeches.
I didn't mention her sometimes. I mentioned her every time, actually, because I wrote about her in my book. I have a whole chapter called Anna Marie in my book. She made an impression on me because she was my best girlfriend in Berlin, and we were together a whole lot, and we just got along so well, you know. And she made such an impression on me. And when we left Berlin and we had to say goodbye, it was very painful, and we cried and carried on. We were 9 years old, and we didn't know why we had to leave each other at that time. I mean, we knew, but we didn't quite understand. So as I say, then eventually I wrote my memoir, and I put her in that. And then I started to speak out in New Jersey at the Holocaust Resource Center from Richard Stockton University. And I gave talks, and then as time went on, I gave more talks. And every time I spoke about my life, my early life, I would mention Anna Marie. And I said, if anybody ever hears the name Anna Marie Warenberg, please let me know, because I never found her again. I looked for her, actually, in many websites and many different places, never found her. And that's how that came about. And apparently, some wonderful person at the Shoah put the dots together this last November and found out that there was an Anna Marie who is now called Anna Maria Warenberg, and she lives in Chile, Santiago.
Yeah. I mean, because both of you so bravely and courageously wanted to tell your story and share it. Ana Maria was doing the same thing, only a world away in Santiago, Chile, where she and her parents had fled to just months after your family left. But you had no idea, right?
No, I had no idea. In the meantime, of course, I was speaking here in Florida and all over the world, really. And I was speaking everywhere and always mentioning her name. And she was doing the same thing. Neither one of us thought the other one was still around. Right. But she also wrote a book.
Yeah. So a wonderful researcher brought you together, an American now, someone in Chile who speaks German and Spanish, but you speak German and English, and wonderful researcher grabbed the differences, understood them, got you two together, and you started having Zoom meetings. How wonderful is that? Describe the feeling you had when you learned that she was still alive and able to communicate with you.
It was amazing. I mean, the lady who really put all the dots together deserves to be named. Her name is Ita Gordon, and I hope I pronounce her first name right. And she pulled it all together and couldn't believe what she had found. and when they figured it out, they called my children and said, would your mother want to know about this? And they said, of course. And I did. And the same thing happened in her family. And we were both thrilled that we found each other. I mean, it was a miracle. Who would have thought that after 82 years, we could find each other again? It's very unusual that out of the Holocaust, which has so many terrible stories, that such a good story comes out to give hope to other people.
Right. And your story has just caught the imagination of so many people. I've heard about it through other people. You've been on TV. You were on the Lester Holt evening news program for a segment. You've been interviewed. There are YouTubes about you. I'm interviewing you. It's wonderful, wonderful to have you on, because in my Jewish community in Connecticut, we're studying about the Shanghai Jews. We're having a program on it. We're reading the Last Kings of Shanghai, all about the Kadoris that you
I
mentioned
read
and the
that. Yeah.
Sassoon family. Yes, I mean, so there's so many wonderful connections that we have, and you have just struck a nerve with your wonderful story and your wonderful friendship. And tell us about how you felt as soon as you started talking. It was as though you never stopped talking
Well,
with each
we
other.
just we just had a connection right from the get-go. It was amazing because all our families were on Zoom with us. I mean, as many as we could get, and they're all crying. And here's Anna Maria and I speaking in German because her English is not 100%, and I don't speak Spanish. So we're speaking German, which for me was a little difficult because I haven't spoken German for a long time. And we're chattering on and we're laughing and we're carrying on and everybody else is crying. But we're just so happy to be together that we had a lot of catching up to do.
Right. But you're still talking to her even on the phone besides your Zoom sessions?
Every Sunday. Every Sunday
Wow.
morning, we have my kids know not to call me on Sunday morning because that's my morning call with Anna Maria. And although I still call her Anna Marie, which was her childhood name. And we talk to each other. We also email each other. And now we're making plans to meet each other, hopefully in September in Miami.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. That's terrific. So I think now is the time for me to turn to the images that we have, the little PowerPoint, okay? And we can see some of the images of the things that you've been telling us about. Do you see that, Betty? Can you see the screen?
I see my book there. Thank you.
There you are.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So once my name was Sarah, which you've explained, and you wrote this memoir, which is available, I think, on Amazon. And it, as you said, you've got a whole chapter on there about your friend Anna Maria and all of your experiences. And
Excuse me, Sheila. Excuse me, Sheila. It's available from me personally also. And I now have a
okay.
website where
What is
it's bettygrubenshikoff.com, where it can be quoted and I can inscribe it then.
Oh, wonderful. BettyGrubenshikoff.com, where you can access Betty's memoir. That's terrific. So let's just see some of the album of going through your life a bit. Slideshow from the beginning. Okay, there you are. And there you are in Germany, I gather?
Yep. In some kind of a park before when we were still allowed to go to parks. I'm the smaller one. My sister's next to me holding a doll.
Now I see two dolls. Remember you told me that your mother brought a doll on the ship. Is one of those dolls the ones?
Yes, that would be my doll. My sister had a different one. My sister's name was Edith, by the way.
Uh-huh. And there you two of you are. About how old were you then?
We were about 8 or 9. I'm on the left, and Anna Maria is on the right.
And how old
And
were you there?
there I was about 8, wearing one of my German dresses that we used for photographs.
Now, were you known as Ilse then?
Oh yes,
Yes,
definitely.
Ilse. And there is Anna.
Anna Marie. Mm-hmm.
And this is the note. Tell us about this note.
This is this little note that it's hard for me to read it. There's a picture of me next to it, where I say, when you look at this little book, remember how good it was that we have met, and I sign it, you're Ilse.
And Anna Marie saved that all these years.
Yes, yes.
Wow. And now you've talked about that important day that life for the Jews changed everything. The broken shop, Kristallnacht, the burned synagogues, the men and women arrested, your father being called down for the Gestapo, but fortunately getting passage out of Germany in time to leave, right?
Yes,
Kristallnacht,
except
the night. Yeah.
Anna Maria's father was taken in by the Germans on Kristallnacht, and he spent about 4 weeks in a concentration camp, and she has very, very bad memories about that.
Yes. Well, as I said, over about 30,000 citizens were arrested and placed in camps and prisons.
Right.
And then some were allowed to go. Between 1938 and 40, Hitler was allowing you to go if you could find passage somewhere.
And if you could pay a lot of money.
Exactly. Again, November 9th, 1938. I found this English newspaper. Looting mobs defy Goebbels, Jewish homes fired, women beaten. The Jews are cowering in terror. Their shops are wrecked and looted. Their synagogues are burning. Their homes are at the mercy of gangs drunk with destruction. Not even the proclamation of Dr. Goebbels, the propaganda minister, broadcast this afternoon, and again, ordering the stoppage, could curb the madness of the mobs. Wow.
Yeah.
Another synagogue being destroyed. I think German people watching things being burned, Jewish items being burned.
You know, lots of them were not unfriendly to the Jews, but they were forced to watch this.
Right. They had fear in their hearts as well. More destruction. An example of shops with the Jude sign on their glass broken. And escape to Shanghai. And there you are on the ship.
Yes.
And those are your parents. By the way, what was your dad's name and your mother's name?
My father was Max Cohn. My mother was Olga Cohn. And now that I look at that picture, I see how sad she's looking.
Yeah.
And I'm in the front and my sister's on the side.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
And this is just shows your Ilse Cohn, your resident certificate in once you got to Shanghai.
Yes, but you notice the yellow stripe on top. That
Yeah.
denotes that we were Jewish. Even in Shanghai, they put that on.
Really?
Yeah.
So you were a teenager then when you got that. Was that in the mid 40s?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, here you are with your family.
In our room in the ghetto, actually, yeah.
In
We
your
all
room in
lived
the
in the
ghetto.
same room. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And there you are, McGregor Road, 1941, Shanghai. So this is right before they established the ghetto, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's when we still had 2 rooms, which was luxurious at the time.
Really? Your mom is smiling.
Yes, she's a little bit better there. And my sister and I we're still wearing our German style clothing.
And there you and your husband.
That's the wedding dress that's now hanging in.
Yes.
Yeah,
And how many of your daughters wore it? 2?
2. Mm-hmm.
2 of them. Wonderful. What kind of hall were you married in?
Excuse me?
What kind of place were you married in?
We were married in twice actually in Shanghai at that time. You had to be married by a Chinese lawyer or judge, and so we had that 1 week, and then the next week we had a religious wedding. But we went to a place called Union Church, where all mixed marriages, which is what we were at the time, of course, were married because the synagogues wouldn't marry my husband unless he changed his religion, and his church wouldn't marry me unless I changed, and neither one of us wanted to change.
Yeah.
So everybody who was married somebody out of their faith would go to the Union Church. They were quite busy.
1949. You were already
Yeah.
married by then, right?
Sitting on the Bund, yeah, on by the Wang River, yeah.
The Bund is the magnificent waterfront section of Shanghai with the hotels and the big
Yes,
buildings. Yeah,
yes,
much of it created by the Baghdadi Jews.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Did you ever go into the Cathay Hotel or the Majestic Hotel run by those people?
We were in, actually, we had our first date in front of uh, the Cathay Hotel, which is now the Peace Hotel.
Right.
And because we didn't have quite enough money to go in there, it was very fancy. So we met outside, and that was our first real date, my husband and mine.
Wow.
And
Now you're in. How did you get that outfit that you're wearing? It's very.
that one of my Chinese jackets, yeah, this was one that I had, of course, bought in China. And this picture was taken in Shanghai by an Indian photographer called Sam Tata, who belonged to a very large, very wealthy Indian family, the Tatas. And he took that picture of me, and I call that my glamour picture.
It is. You do look like a model posing. Um, Beautiful.
Thank you.
So here we are. Was this the first Zoom that was taken with the two of you?
Yes, yes, the first time when we first spotted each other again.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And the people from the Shoah Foundation, that woman, say her name again so we can remember who she was, who brought
Her
you
name was
together.
her name was Ita Gordon, or is
Ita.
Ita Gordon. And also not only the Shoah Foundation, but the museum in Santiago, the Holocaust Museum in Santiago, Chile, was involved in it, as well as the Florida Holocaust Museum here in St. Petersburg.
Wonderful. And you brought your families on. That was wonderful. And you're all doing a toast.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
who led the toast? Do you remember?
I don't know. Somebody said L'chaim. I think it was me. And we all said L'chaim, and we all did the best we could with the champagne that we had brought.
So you had children, grandchildren, great grandchildren on the Zoom. Wonderful.
That's not even all of them. There's a lot more, but we couldn't fit them all on the screen.
Sure. And there she is in Chile because while you were educating people about your experiences in Shanghai, Anna Maria was educating people about her experiences in Chile and escaping Nazism from Germany herself, right? So she is recorded and many times giving speeches to different organizations in Chile.
Yes.
Yeah. And here she is. And here you are speaking.
That's my testimony.
Speeches.
That's my testimony, actually. I think. No, that's a speech I gave at the Holocaust Museum over here in Florida.
Okay, right. And there's your daughter Jennifer, who I've communicated with, and who you live nearby, and a blessing to you.
This is the film that the Global News of Canada brought out, which they did a fantastic job with that.
They did a beautiful. People want to go on. It's about a 10-minute YouTube video, which goes over so much of your experiences that we've talked about, and it's beautifully done. It's a wonderful, wonderful memorial for you too. Yes.
Thank you.
And then here you are autographing your book, right?
Right.
So again, BettyGrebenshikoff.com. Go to your website, go on YouTube. You can get a copy of Betty's book. And there you are again, a final photo showing you in front of a poster about the Shanghai ghetto.
That poster is a documentary that was made about 20 years ago in in America, but actually we went to Shanghai for this. It was made by a young company, film company, and it's called Shanghai Ghetto and tells the story. I'm one of the people in it. And after that, there was another one called Survival in Shanghai, another documentary, which I was also in. And then aside from that, I was also a consultant to the Shanghai Sonatas, which aired last March in Delaware, University of
Yes,
Delaware.
and Zhang Gao, I'm going to be interviewing him next week about the
Oh,
creation of a musical about the Shanghai Jews and their relationship to the Chinese and to classical music. And you were a
yes.
consultant on that project. So there's so many
He's my
wonderful
friend.
things.
Yeah.
Yes,
He's become a good friend. He's a wonderful person, and
yes.
you will just love him.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that and looking forward to having the musical mounted properly where we can go out and see it in person. That would be wonderful. And I'd love to meet you at one of his performances. That would be fabulous, wouldn't that?
I'd love
Wouldn't
to
that
be
be
there. I'd
great?
love to be there.
Yes. Yes, I'd love to do that. Okay, those are the uh, images we have. And now let's just go back. So, Betty, what an amazing life! What an amazing story! Tell me, is there anything we've left out that you want to say? Some memory, some remembrance, some thought that you have that you haven't expressed yet? We want to hear it.
Oh, well, my thought is that we have to keep teaching. We have to keep not only our story, but the story of all the genocides and all the hate and division that's going on right now and has been going on, and anti-Semitism. We have to keep speaking up and talking about how we can hopefully change that by reminding people that it's all happened before and it could change, and we have to look to the future and to our children to make a better life than we had, because we're just lucky. Anna Maria and I are very fortunate that we got through this and that we can teach, and we're still doing it at 91 years of age. We're still talking, we're still trying to show people that there can be a better way, there will be a better way, and that this is what we're here for.
Well, that's wonderful. I wish you the blessings of a much longer life than you have so far, much longer, with much more education, much more joy from your children and grandchildren, and the joy of your friendship with Anna Maria. I can't wait to see your reunion in person. That would be wonderful. And thank you so much for Betty for teaching me and teaching us so much about a very important part of Jewish history, how we were able to seek refuge in one of the most unlikely places that many of us don't think of. And now we're learning so much about it and realizing that there is refuge around the corner. There are people who are willing to help, willing to hide Jews, willing to free Jews, willing to save them. And you are an example of someone who's so grateful for that. You've devoted your life to teaching the lessons about that. So it's wonderful to have you. And I hope to actually see you in person someday at one of Sean's musicals, and maybe with your friend. That would be wonderful.
I would
Okay.
really hope so. That's why I still have to be around for many years longer, because I have a lot of work to do yet. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
having me.
Okay, it was wonderful. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time on Talkback. Bye.